Internet, terrible what passes for ninjas these days. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And pancakes are love. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically Review Roundup Issue 2. Episode? You know what? We're making a zine. Fuck the podcast scene. And we are going to cover today in our magical zine for your ear holes, Inception and Speed Racer.
It's like peanut butter and gum together at last. That's a Simpsons joke, by the way.
Simpsons did it.
So this was I was actually kind of excited about this one. The last review roundup that you would have heard a couple of weeks ago, we put together two dark thrillers that happened to be joined by one Mr. Jake Gyllenhaal, and that was the Jake Gyllenhaal Thriller Hour. And This is the summer blockbuster hour. And I've been struggling for a week to try and figure out how to connect these two movies.
Okay. Is Speed Racer a blockbuster?
Well, no, it's not. But there was one question that Will, the person who requested Speed Racer, asked, which allowed me to connect these two movies in one way. And I thought it was, and I'll get to that when we get to reading out his questions list. But I got very excited once I figured out how to connect these two movies. And the way I'm going to connect these two movies is with one phrase.
Sure.
Imagined realities.
Okay.
We can hold on to imagined realities for a second.
Let's hold on to it.
Okay. But this review roundup episode list zine, whatever you want to call it, is our attempt to finally clear out the backlog of requests that we asked you, the listener, to give us, and you kindly did, and we did not fulfill our end of the bargain.
But now we are doing that.
So some of these requests, I believe Will's request came from 2017.
Hell
perhaps?
Yeah. Great year, 2017.
Might have been 2016. It was a while back. Every time Will emails, and Will is a fantastic listener, by the way. I love talking to Will. Every time he emails, he's like, I always kind of have to sneak in my apology for not having tackled Speed Racing
Not anymore, you don't.
But not now.
This is for you, Will.
That's right. And so we will institute a more streamlined, more efficient request process so that we can get through these in a little bit quicker, so it doesn't take you 2 years to hear about the movie you want to discuss.
Yes.
But that'll be after we clear out these reviews, which I believe will be 2 more episodes, whiwhich will cover 6 films.
7 films. 6 films. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I was like, wait, no, why don't we just add one? Because screw it.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right.
And we do appreciate that everyone contacts us, but we are still getting requests, even though we have closed up the request
We've closed the lines.
So there are no more requests in for now, and we're going to be a little bit more selective with our requests, not because we're being douchebags, although we are. It's just that we want to be a little bit more selective and efficient and make choices that mean that these happen quicker.
Yeah, we don't want to be sitting on your requests that we ask you to give us for years to come. I was actually in a conversation. We've been getting you know what? I love everyone who listens to this show because we've been getting requests, even though we've been getting more requests since we said we're not taking requests than ever before. I got my first request via Instagram, and I felt bad that I had to turn them down. But one day we'll be back.
Oh, she will never Instagram DM you again.
I felt bad, but you know, it's nice to be excited.
And if you do want to get in touch with us, right now we would love to hear your thoughts on any review we've done or any questions you have, the specific films that don't involve us doing a whole hour review. I guess that's one of the things. We really do sit down to do these films in a bit of detail. I'll watch the movie twice if I can, and so
I'll watch it 3 times. Yeah.
Well, I'll watch it 4 times.
Well, I'll just leave it on in wherever I go.
Yeah. I'll play it on my phone. I'm watching it right now.
We're watching both. I'm watching Speed Racer and Inception at the same time.
I'm putting them up on split screen and playing them at double speed just so I can cover them for this movie.
I'm playing on my half speed.
Speed Racer at double speed is a terrifying thought. At any rate, email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod for your questions. I had a fantastic question about Sorry to Bother You, which unfortunately I cannot discuss on the podcast because it would give away too big a spoiler for that particular movie. But thank you again for that email. We really enjoyed that email.
Indeed.
And now moving on to Matt, I want to just set the stage. 2008, Speed Racer. Where were you in 2008? That's 10 years ago.
10 years ago, in 2008, I had just completed. Oh my God, this is a blast from the past. I don't know if you've ever seen these. Remember my old movie review racket with Mr. Stephen Buja, Stephen Van Patten, and Aaron Gould called Same Night Tonight. and Same Night Movie Review, we had just completed what essentially was a sketch comedy half-hour show based around being a fake award show for films called, I shit you not, the Golden Shot Awards.
The Golden Shot Awards.
And it was because we rated films with alcohol, 1 shot being the best, 5 being the worst, because the more alcohol you need, the worse the film probably is.
Okay.
And we had just completed it after working on it for a full year, so we were punting around with all of 2007 and 2008's films for the, if there was a category, for instance, we would be, instead of showing clips from the movies, we would act out scenes that were in the vein of the movies, not like line for line, but like that would give you the feeling the movies gave you. Okay. And then there was also like a bit of a Muppet Show-esque sort of side plot going on in the background. Anyway, that's what I was doing in 2008. I was not watching Speed Racer.
Okay. All right.
I stayed away from Speed Racer. I think look, 10 years ago, I don't think I was still like full edgelord, but like I was definitely still trying to. That was back when, like, how old was I? I was 26, I guess. So I was still trying to be cool.
Okay.
And so
you've given up the facade now.
Oh yeah, come on. But so like I was like probably in the camp of like, still coming off the Matrixes. And now the Wachowskis are doing Speed Racer, and I was never a fan of the cartoon. Okay. And I didn't really have much to latch onto, and it looked all bubblegum and poppy and just sort of, stuff that probably didn't match with my image back then.
Your movie had to match your image.
Listen, I had black nail polish till I was 33 years old, and I was wearing a dark leather trench coat, and I loved every second of it. Please don't get me wrong. Props to my roots. Yeah. But those sweet, dark gothic roots. But I just wasn't. This wasn't in my. It wasn't in my periph.
Okay.
What about you?
I'm going to jump ahead to 2009 because that's when I actually watched Speed Racer, and I watched it on video, home DVD or somehow we were watching it
on
home.
Betamax,
probably
Laserdisc.
And I was watching it with my best bud Luke, and Luke and I have a thing, which is that we love to watch bad movies together. Luke and I will line up for midnight screenings all the time.
That's fun.
He was my go-to guy for like midnight any movie that's coming out, big Hollywood blockbuster that's coming out at a midnight, we will get tickets and we'll go at midnight.
Right.
We didn't go to see Speed Racer. but we did get it on DVD a year later. We popped it in. We watched it for 15 minutes, and both of us said, "I don't want to watch this anymore."
Interesting.
And this is the thing. We have a high tolerance for shitty movies, and we have a high tolerance for like, just sugar rush kind of cotton candy popcorn kind of movies. Right. And this was one where both of us just looked at each other and said, "I don't want to watch any more. This is overwhelming to my senses."
Well, it seems like Will kind of had a similar thing here.
Yeah. So Will asked us to do the movie, and Will had a couple of very specific questions about the movie.
1, can style be substance? If yes, then what happens if this style doesn't age particularly well? 2, chimpanzee and spittle? Sprittle.
I think his name was what was the character's name? The little kid.
Oh, the comic duo. And then 3, races still looked cool though, right? Right? And he also mentioned how his partner dropped off of Speed Racer after 10 minutes. That was the part I was referencing, just like you.
Which is exactly the same thing that happened to me. The thing I was curious about watching it this time around was I was kind of trying to place myself in the Wachowskis' frame of reference. So The Matrix's Bound had come out. They had written 2 Assassins. Yep. Was that the title? They'd written Assassins, the movie Assassins with Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone, and then obviously Matrix had come out, and Matrix had changed the world.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, I have to back up a little bit. Wachowskis wrote Assassins?
I believe so. Now I'm going to have to Google this.
Please do. Yeah. I love Assassins.
Yep, They wrote Assassins.
My life just connected in a weird, snappy, like last piece of a puzzle way. That is, I love Assassins.
It's been a while since I've seen Assassins.
I'm sure it's terrible, but it's too much ingrained in my like weird action movie nonsense world where.
And it's directed by Richard Donner, who's a great director.
Oh, I love Assassins.
Yeah. Well, so that was their breakthrough hit, and then they directed with Bound, which I love. I absolutely adore Bound. And then obviously they changed the world with The Matrix.
Yes.
Are you a big fan of The Matrix?
Yes, but
leather trench coats. I'm guessing yes.
But here's the deal: I was wearing that before The Matrix, and then honestly, The Matrix
You're still edgelording
did
right
a
now.
lot of. I know. The Matrix actually did a lot more damage to my image than my initial, leather trench coat did, because then everyone thought I was being Neo, and then I'm like, that's not no. But
I was Neo before Neo was Neo.
I was never Neo. That's the thing. Like, I don't know. That's just what iconography is.
Yeah.
I do like The Matrix. I liked it a lot when it came out.
Yeah.
I also like it continually. I've gone back and probably watched it every 3 or 4 years, and it's still good.
Yeah.
The sequels are rough and then rougher.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's
an entirely different conversation.
Sure.
I just want to like frame us up
and
before we get to SpeedRacer.
Animatrix. I was a big fan of a lot of that too,
which they oversaw.
It was more interesting stories. I think that this though. And I think this is something that comes from age. Again, I have gradually moved away from all of the edgelordiness that I used to endeavor to be. And there's something I think cathartic about being known for one thing. And if that thing is like grimdark, noir, tech, philosophy, like, action, badass stuff, to then just do a 180, go full bubblegum PG.
Yeah.
And do it with just like a well-known yet not really popular anymore kids franchise.
Yeah.
And I think back when this came out, I was like, "What are they doing? Like, this is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing they'd ever do." Da, da, da. But like now, again, as an older gentleman, it makes so much sense.
Right.
It's a palate cleanser, and it's such an opposite swing of the pendulum. Without sacrificing style, just the style pendulum broke off and swung onto another pendulum. Like, it's just it's so different.
Right.
I had not seen Speed Racer until yesterday.
Okay. But you knew it existed. You
I
knew
knew
what
it existed.
Had you seen clips of it, or
Nope.
you hadn't seen anything of it?
I saw like TV ads when it came out.
Okay.
I just stayed away.
I have this week. I've spent so much time reading so many think pieces, watching so many video essays about Speed Racer, because I have been trying to get over that initial. I think there are basically only 2 movies in existence where I've turned it off after 15 minutes and never returned to it. And the other one is one I really want to go back to. Is Tombstone, and it was because I was in a theater with like 20 other people, and we were the only 20 people there, and nobody was watching the movie, and so we left. And I've always wanted to finish watching that movie, but that and Speed Racer are literally the only 2 films in existence that I haven't watched all the way through once starting. So I was excited to go back, but I just remember my initial response to those first 15 minutes, which were, I felt like Sprittle and Chim Chim when they broke into the candy thing in the airplane.
Yeah.
And then just inhaled way too much chocolate in one hit and was just passed out on the floor. I found those first 15 minutes so overwhelming, it was the only way I could describe it was a sugar rush of a movie, and it was way too much sugar for me. I felt overwhelmed. And so I was curious to go back. And then recently, because it's the 10-year anniversary of Speed Racer, there have been all these think pieces come out about how this is an underrated masterpiece, about how, because the movie did flop. Again, to put it in context, in 2008, it came out the weekend after Iron Man, which absolutely destroyed it. It did not have good word of mouth reviews. It did poorly in its first week, and it continued to decrease. It eventually made its money back, but it didn't. It was by no means a smash.
Sure.
And then, of course, the other film that came out that year, there were many of them, but the other film that made a deep impression that year was The Dark Knight.
The only 3 films that came out in 2008,
and WALL-E. So in the and I think this is going to relate to Raphael's question about Inception later on, which is about blockbusters, which is why I wanted to kind of frame these 2 films together. Is in terms of how does this film play as some blockbuster? And of course, the question is not very well. It didn't do very well. But I have been, as I said, watching so many pieces, trying to get into the headset of like, why do people love this movie? Because there is a big resurgence of people that absolutely love this movie, that claim, that call it an unrated masterpiece. And I have to say, no, sir, it is the kids that are wrong on this one, because I am not on board with this movie. Now, I appreciate it on a way because it's been 10 years. Again, I appreciate it in terms of putting it in context of 2008, where the Wachowskis were before this, where they got to, how they ended at this point, where the kind of bold step that this film is and how very few films look and feel like this. I do appreciate all of that. But I found this to be such a almost tonal monstrosity where I like the first 10 minutes I was like, I think my son would like this. My 2-year-old son might enjoy the colorfulness and vibrancy of this movie. And then it got into a discussion about corporate capitalism and stock prices, and I was like, you know what? I think we might have to I think this might go over his head. And then it became a sincere family drama with ninjas for some reason, and I was just all over the map with this movie, and I couldn't quite latch on to anything. I want to talk about Will's specific question because I think that's an excellent question. Can style be substance? I think that's a really, really great question. But now that this is the first time that you've seen this movie, Matt, what are your thoughts on it? Your overall thoughts before we dive deep?
I liked it. I don't think I would have liked it back then.
Yeah. What did you like about it?
I like it because it is not only is it unapologetic as to what it is, and it is a love letter, a near frame accurate, not frame accurate's the wrong term because obviously it's not, but a tonally frame accurate recreation in live action and dated CG of the cartoon. Every actor in this film, and they do get muddled by the effects and all the other stuff, is seemingly having an amazing time acting these super broad, very intense characters.
Yeah.
And it's... I think it has a lot to do with being so sure of what it is, not apologizing for what it is, and also, honestly, being in our current 2018 climate, that all that sort of together really made me latch onto it more than I think I would have back, in 2008. I wasn't prepared to have any emotional connection whatsoever to any character in this film, let alone multiple.
Right.
And I did, again, not like a crazy, like, oh my God, I'll think about what this character went through for the rest of my... No, but like, it painted things so distinctly and one-notedly. But in that performance, it was like a masterclass. Like, for instance, if I need to feel what exactly the color like red would make me feel,
right?
The characters in this movie sort of do that, like that level of like, it's not nuanced. It's pure baseline. Like, this is red, this is blue, this is yellow, but it's the clearest red, blue, yellow you've kind of ever seen.
Do you mean from an emotional analogy?
I mean from an emotional, not from that muddled CG. I'm talking about from a character.
Yeah. So if someone is sincere about their love for racing, you've got that character.
The archetypes are all there and 100% crystal clear and in your face.
Right.
And you put on that, a lot of the characters are also like, it is weirdly a family movie. Like, it's about this family, and every character, for the most part, gets their moment.
Right.
Everyone gets an emotional tie to Speed.
Yeah.
And it's cheesy as fuck, but like, I think it might have to do with a lot with the time and the time I'm watching this movie. I kind of need some cheesy as fuck. I kind of need some saccharine good guy beats a corporate nonsense thing. And it's a childish way of thinking, and it's too fucking long.
Yeah.
But I think I wanted that, and I didn't think I knew I wanted that. And you can trash this movie on a lot of things, and I don't think. Let me rephrase I feel like I'm praising.
Yeah.
This is not an undiscovered masterpiece.
Right.
This is a film that does one specific thing incredibly well, And if you can latch onto that one specific thing, which I feel like I did, I don't think I would have back in 2008, then it's a special, fun movie.
What's the one thing? Is it the emotional thing or is it the visuals?
I honestly think it's style. Can style be substance, right? I think it's all together.
Right.
And by that, I mean, I was trying to think of this, and it's kind of hard to put into words. But obviously, the visuals, and I was like with you, like the first 10 minutes, I was like, I like the way this classroom looks. The colors are really nice. And then they go driving outside, and I'm like, because it's awful looking.
Yeah.
But you get sort of over that because the substance or the style isn't just the visual style. Even though I use the colors as an analogy because that's a strong visual aspect to it, even though I was talking about emotional tones.
Yeah.
The characters themselves and what they all believe and what they all want is so one note, just like all of the plot points, just like all of the actual color tones in the film, just like how, haptic the racing is. The racing, that's the only word to describe it, is just haptic nonsense. It all just funnels itself into this substance of style,
right?
And it's nice. It's easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy to follow a lot of times. So depending on, you know what, I actually take that back. A lot of the races that are so complicated, and I do think they're overblown, or they don't need that much sort of pop and flash and whatever. I actually didn't know where a car I wanted to know, like where it was. Like I was never lost.
Okay.
And these are complicated, weird Mario Kart 8 tracks.
Yeah.
And there's weapons and nonsense and oil slicks and snake and bee launchers. And I'm like, what the shit?
Yeah.
But to be honest, and again, this is where the Wachowskis pedigree comes through. I followed the action. I was never like, there was one part in the movie, and it was actually a narrative hole I'll talk about later, that I was like, wait, what? Why do they need to do that?
Yeah.
And it's funny. It was complex enough. It was all the stuff that I really cared about in the emotional core of it is about family and about the love of a thing, and it'll carry you through. But like when the big bad sneery guy, Royalton, gives his like speech to Speed.
Yeah,
I was like, this is he's chewing scenery on, obviously, but like it was a feel bad speech. Like I get the what he was trying to make Speed feel. Yeah. I felt
right.
Even though it's a fucking ridiculous world. So this movie has to be doing something right.
Yeah.
If what should just be cookie cutter cutouts of nonsense characters are making me feel the way that they're supposed to be making the main character feel when they speak to them.
Okay.
And that's for the good notes and the bad notes, as far as like being yelled at or being like loving, when his father talks to him or his mother or even Trixie or whoever.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's weird. And it's not for everybody. I mean, it took me a minute to get used to how it was cut together.
Yeah.
Like time means nothing.
Yeah, it does. The first 15 minutes I think is overwhelming, not just because of the visual style, but it's also packing in a lot of story within that first race. So you see exactly the moment to moment narrative connection between Speed's past and things that are happening in the race, and it even manifests itself into like this sort of game mechanic of seeing the ghost race in front of you.
Mario Kart.
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty big sensory overload in that first few minutes, and if you can get on board with it, it's kind of amazing. I have not been able to get on board with it,
which is totally understandable.
And I think I did think about a couple of things, that reasons why I was never able to tonally get on board with this. And one of the things I was thinking about was Eric Stoltz. The actor Eric Stoltz, who's not in this film.
I'm waiting to see where you go with this.
Yeah. But Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future.
Yes.
And have you ever seen those original clips of Eric Stoltz as...
forever ago.
Yeah. And the thing was that Robert Zemeckis kind of watched it and decided, hey, Eric Stoltz is kind of... He's doing more of a closer to a real drama, and I want an actor who's going to sell me the sort of absurdity of it all and have fun with it. And then they recast Michael J. Fox, and the rest is history. I could never get on board with Emile Hirsch as Speed in this film. I felt he was delivering almost too sincere a performance for what the world of this film is. So whenever he was talking about, I really just believe in racing, and racing is about, this and its connection to that, I was like, I really kind of want an actor to like overkill this and to sell me something that matches the visuals, which is whereas what I'm seeing in him is like, because obviously he's probably performing this in front of a green screen or whatever.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what those visuals are. And for him, the visuals could be The Dark Knight or something like that. Like it could be an entirely photorealistic world. And I found that tonal juxtaposition just never quite played for me. I never quite got on board. I certainly see the sincerity in the story. There's nothing wrong with the story. It's played for complete, absolute sincerity, and I have no issue with that. But for example, when Emil Hirsch's character Speed is doing that monologue, and then we cut to Chim Chim and Sprittle kind of doing like this guitar solo rampage through the laboratory, I kind of never found those tones to reconcile in any sort of cohesive way for me.
That was Freebird, by the way. Sorry.
Freebird?
It was literally the song Freebird.
Oh, was it Freebird?
And I was like, wow, okay.
So I just, that's the reason. But I certainly, the other thing is I certainly appreciate the sort of audacity of the visual language of this film, which is that it doesn't feel, it's in no way a gimmick. It feels like this is a very clearly worked out visual world that they have developed that has a connection to obviously the anime cartoon that it came from, but also develops it into a three-dimensional state, uses a different palette, kind of makes it brighter and more colorful, and suits the 3D renders of it. So I actually dug that it was entirely considered. Like nothing feels haphazard. It doesn't feel like this was made amateur. I mean, I will say when they walk outside and it's like the green screens kind of reminded me of like the Phantom Menace green screens kind of thing, and a little bit worse, to be honest with you. But I could kind of buy it as the tonality of the film.
The outsides look like a Sonic the Hedgehog background. Like it's like you're like, huh?
Yeah, but I could kind of like go, yeah, okay, this is what you're doing. Like that it's not that they're doing things badly. It's like they've made a clear choice. Let's make the world outside bright and kind of cut out ish-y.
Yeah.
But I never got on board with the actual story. Like, for example, the reveal of Racer X and the brother's story of leaving and passing away, and Pop's, like feeling regret. It's all there, and I get it. I just didn't buy the sincerity of the tonal quality of that story alongside the visual ridiculousness.
I think you actually this is honestly the most, this is so you and me. But I think the thing that you didn't like about Speed's performance and like how you can't latch onto it because he's too earnest and it doesn't seem to fit in the world, I actually see as the reason why I do.
It's the anchor for you.
I think if he was as over the top as everyone else, it would feel too hokum for me, and I couldn't put myself in that character. Like he's almost like a bit of a blank slate. Yeah. And even the way I keep going back to, because I was shocked how even Susan Sarandon and John Goodman and Christina Ricci, whenever there was a scene talking to Speed, the way that the angles were set up and the closeness you were to those people was very intimate in a weird sort of way, especially surrounded by this bombastic nonsense when that's not going on. Yeah. And with Speed being the one that's not sort of as over the top, it really was able to, the combination of those two things was really able to put me in the driver's seat of being, or not of being Speed Racer, but of definitely understanding how Speed would feel without his performance being the thing that informs me. Right. If that makes sense. He is the cipher in which I can experience what that character is supposed to be experiencing. I don't think maybe that was on purpose, maybe it wasn't. I don't think it's a herald of it's not good character writing, but it might be good script writing depending on what you're trying to do.
I can totally also agree that if you did kind of do what I was suggesting and find like a Michael J. Fox to sell the sort of gee whiz of it a little bit more, that it might become even more overwhelming.
I think I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I can totally buy that. But as it stands, I think I just thought a little bit about how Eric Stoltz didn't fit in Back to the Future and Michael J. Fox did, and I kind of felt like Emil Hirsch's performance didn't quite fit into what the rest of this world was.
It's interesting because Back to the Future, you need the character that Michael J. Fox turned Marty McFly into. You need it or it doesn't work. You can't play, it doesn't play out. If you don't have that thing to play off Doc Brown, then the rest of the stuff just sort of falls apart. This, I feel like, it's almost like a Jenga board or like a puzzle where if you take out like the one thing, it's amazing that it all still stands because it's everything's sort of leaning on itself to keep it up. And I think the style, the other actors, everything.
Like I found Christina Ricci kind of was in the right movie.
The literal embodiment of anime. I've never seen a human being feel so much like a cartoon. All of them kind of did that.
Yeah,
except Speed.
Except for Speed.
But I liked that.
And also Speed and Racer, and Matthew Fox and spoiler alert for who Matthew Fox actually turns out to be. Those three, that trifecta of brothers, which is kind of the center of the movie, I kind of found it felt like they were in a different movie.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think look, Matthew Fox is a complicated character in cinema and television history. I think he nails this here. I think he chews scenery. I think everyone does, and he has to be the edgelordy one in a world that is distinctly not edgelordy.
Remember, I'm not saying that he's bad, and I'm not saying Emil Hirsch is bad. I'm saying that the tonality of their performance didn't gel for me.
I think Racer X, even though it's a different emotional feeling, his intensity and tone matches the intensity and tone of every other one note of every other character, with the exception of Speed. Again, Speed is the one that doesn't fit this, but I don't think the storyline necessarily doesn't fit. I think it's just there's different things to latch onto.
Yeah, totally. And I guess maybe another way to describe it is I felt like Racer X, played by Matthew Fox, was kind of like Christian Bale's Batman dropping into this world.
Yeah,
and I was like, ugh.
But that's always what Racer X was, even the cartoons.
And I just kind of didn't. I found it to be kind of a heavy mismatch that didn't quite gel for me.
I liked it. He talked like this.
But I liked, again, the other thing that I really liked watching it, and I was like, we got to the end of the movie, and I was like, oh, that's it. There's no sequel spinoff. There's no like continuing story. It was like, that's it. And it is a complete story.
Sure.
It is a story from beginning to end. That is the end. And I found that really refreshing. And I was just like remembering, oh yeah, Iron Man came out the week beforehand, which Iron Man is not as guilty of this as later films would become, but Iron Man sets up the stage for continuing ongoing stories. And I watched this and I was like, oh, I kind of like that this is just one story and that is it. And it feels very complete. I feel like I've gone on the journey that was meant to be told by this story, and there is no more to tell. And there was something about that really spoke to me. I found that really refreshing now.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about this film. I don't think no, that's not true. I was going to say I'll never adamantly defend it against someone who said it's a piece of shit.
Right.
But I think I would. Because it's not a piece of shit. It's just a different thing than most any other thing. And I'll never rag on somebody for not liking a thing if they just sort of say it's not if you can. It's kind of like whoa. It's kind of like Mother. And by that I mean, if you can tell me why you don't like it, and it makes sense in either a critical standpoint or even just a emotional or tonal or what you feel, what your likes and dislikes are, I will 100% respect the fact that you don't like it, which is sort of true for everything. But there's other films where I'll get more amped about being like, well, no, I don't know. It's just not something I want to argue with.
I think the thing there is that you can never discount the ambition of the movie as being haphazard or half-hearted.
Right.
That's that thing where it's I will always praise a film that has ambitions and fails, in my eyes, as opposed to something that feels kind of haphazard and succeeds.
Right.
I'm more impressed by the gravitas with which they constructed this film.
Sure.
Feels very, very complete. It feels very in control, and it feels very much like they wanted to say. I don't feel anything in this film is a mistake, or anything in this film is was chosen inconsequentially.
Yeah.
And so I will defend it for that. I personally just didn't attach to the film at any point, and I found that tonal incongruity difficult for me to get over to actually enjoy it. And like you said, it is long.
It is long.
It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. And what's funny is I put it on and I hit pause like in the first 5 minutes just because I wanted to go grab a drink or something, and it was like, and when I saw the 2 hours and 15 minutes, my heart just kind of sank a little bit, and I was like, oh boy, I don't know if I can do this. Like I'm gonna do it, but I really don't know if I can do this.
Right.
So it was a struggle. The thing I think I want to get to though is this, I really do want to get to this question of, can style be substance? Because obviously this film has a real stylistic approach, which is unlike anything we've seen before. And there are a couple of precedents to this kind of overt stylism. In critical film studies, there's a couple of opposite spectrums of how you can approach style. One is an absolute adherence to realism.
Sure.
And that's where you kind of, like it's almost like a stage play kind of thing. You block the camera off, you put it back, and you just kind of let the scenes unfold without too much art direction or what have you. And then the other side is like overt formalism, which is what this is an example of, where everything is art directed, where the camera moves in certain ways, where the lighting is telling you a piece of the story, the sound design is telling you a piece of the story, the compositions are telling you a story, the wardrobe and everything. And there's a couple of films like this that speak to that overt formalism, which I think are interesting. So in 2005, Sin City came out. And Sin City is a film which directly pays homage to Frank Miller's original artwork. And in a way, the style is part of the experience of that film. And I think, and for me, I really enjoyed Sin City because I think the style kind of matched the thematic concerns of what that film was, and everyone, there was a tonal coherency to that film.
Sure.
Whereas, and I watched in preparation for this, I also watched a couple of. I thought a little bit about Tim Burton's Batman movies in terms of their approach to style, which had this sort of overt gothicness to them, which kind of suggested Batman. It allowed us, before Christopher Nolan to get to it, it allowed us to put Batman in a world that made sense, with his long flowing cape and the sort of gothic, sort of gargoyle-infested, shadowy kind of world. That kind of made sense. And then the other film that I watched that I just happened to have was Dick Tracy, the Warren Beatty film.
Oh, wow.
And that again has this sort of like overt sense of formalistic style, again pointing to a comic book. And there's this thing about that I was thinking about, which is, what is that style? If style is part of the substantive experience of the movie, what is the style in Speed Racer telling us?
I mean, the style is, I think it's there. This is a weird answer. Mm-hmm. I think it's there because, for as complex as the visuals are, mm-hmm. it washes over you in a way that other complicated visuals don't. It's so complex and kind of out there. Mm-hmm. Either when it came out or even now, even when it looks even more dated and unreal. Not that it looked real then either, but yeah. The fact that it washes over you so completely if you sign on board. Yeah. It helps deliver the feeling the film is trying to give you, which is the earnestness and the sort of familial feel that the original anime did as well. With Sin City, mm-hmm. this is sort of an interesting dichotomy or comparison. Sin City literally took frames and the color palette and mm-hmm. everything from the comic book and just remade it into a movie. Yep. And it looked great. Yeah. This took what I think the Wachowskis' emotional response to watching Speed Racer mm-hmm. and put what they thought their emotional response would looked like. Because it doesn't look like, outside of like car designs and character things, it doesn't look like the original cartoon. Mm-hmm. It's much more stylized, but it's a different style and a much more hyper style. Yeah. But it does give you the feeling of a Saturday morning adventure cartoon. Right. Jacked to 11 because now it's with real people. Yeah. And the fact that it's doing that lets it sort of wash over you completely and effectively and make what would be normally ineffective effective. Right. So in that sense, it does the style, I don't know if the style is the substance, but the style is the ether in which substance is delivered.
Yeah, so you're saying the style and the substance are correlated by perhaps a nostalgia for the original cartoon, but filtered through a sort of interpretive and updated visual language.
And I think the intensity of the visuals and the simplicity of the story and the very punch you in the face one note characters work so well in a yin-yang sort of way for this. Because if one was more or less complicated, it wouldn't have the weight distribution to make, like, you know, this weird contraption still perpetually move.
Yeah.
It would break and it would fly apart and it would be like a crash without those goo bubbles that they fly out in. Like, it's a weird, it's a balancing act in imbalance, and it's oddly satisfying.
Right.
It goes against a lot of what I would normally consider enjoyable, because if even discussing this, I keep like leaning into it, then I'm like, wait, but I did enjoy it.
Right.
So it's hard.
So the thing for me that I think is interesting is that I think the visual language is bright and colorful and beautiful in sort of that digital way that digital realities can be big, bright, and beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not painterly like, say, Ghost in the Shell or something like that is.
Sure.
You know, like it doesn't have that sort of painterly quality. It's got more of a gauche kind of, you know, bright, big, bold
kind
colors.
of a gauche.
Yeah, which I agree could kind of work into the tonality of the actual storyline. But there's something in the thematic storyline that I thought was really interesting, and that was this. You know, and again, I came back, and this was just again. This is not to suggest that this is the absolute thematic concern of this movie or Inception, but this was the kind of way I connected these two films, was this idea of imagined realities. And there was a thing about something that Speed was really interested in this film. Speed and Pops, they talk a little bit about how they watched this one race when they were younger, and it was Speed and his brother talk about the beauty of the race. The car is a living thing. Speed's mom talks to him about, whenever you watch, I watch what you do. It's like an art, and I want you to be an artist. And basically Royalton is standing up and saying, no, everything that you believe about art is not true. It's entirely a manufactured concern. It is entirely it's a product. It's a product. It's there to manipulate stock prices. Wherever you believe there's art, there is actually something behind pulling the lever for us. And I think, the thing that I thought was interesting in terms of connecting the stylistic choices to this is that the absolute rejection of realism, which I think, again, connects it to the original Saturday morning cartoon, is part of this expression of artistic freedom. This is like the Wachowskis saying, no, films should, the thing that I love about films is art. The thing I love is this sort of bright, colorful, imagined world that has no commonplace sense to, connected to reality. The unfortunate meta text of this is that the film didn't succeed. It wasn't, it wasn't like Speed crossing the finish line and everyone celebrating. The film was fairly wholeheartedly rejected by a common populace. So there's this interesting thing there where I think this is something that the reason why the Wachowskis are really interesting filmmakers is that they have all the visual panache of a Michael Bay or something like that. They work on a big palette, like they're full of ideas. They're full of like grand ideas about reality, about the way our world works, about how science fiction can be analogous to real world, and how those two can interplay with each other. That's what the entire Matrix is about. Yep. Cloud Atlas is a fantastic. I think Cloud Atlas is kind of their masterpiece. It's a really odd film that like you feel like shouldn't work in any way, but it kind of does. And so I think this is an interesting the visual style and the commitment to the visual style is a real expression of this thematic concern of allowing artists to be artists and allowing the truth of art to take over, to be more important than the commercial realities of art. And I think that was an interesting interplay to see those two work together like that. In a way, the story is simplistic, and I think as a viewer, and this is coming back to Will's question of can style be art? can style be the substance? I think that is an entirely applicable way to watch this film, is to watch it with your brain switched off and just absorbing the visuals. Kind of like when we talked about the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you just have to, like, you know, the final entry into Jupiter, which is this visual light show that goes on for 10 to 15 minutes. You just have to kind of run with it. And if you can get on board the train, then that is the experience of the movie. You know, if you can kind of absorb the kind of visual language of the film and just move with it, then it does function in that way where you can just switch off the narrative concern, almost switch off the dialogue, and just enjoy it as a sort of 2-hour moving painting. Well, painting is the wrong word. 2-hour digital.
I mean, they're painting something.
Yeah, digital creation. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think about with this particular film. And I want to come back to that overall as we get into our conversation about Inception. But did you have any other thoughts about this, you know, in relation to that question?
Final thoughts about Speed Racer. If you waited this long to watch it, watch it. If you watched it back in the day and you didn't like it, I might stick with that analogy. I might just suggest you stick with it and don't rewatch it. Because... well, or if you're interested to see how you've changed in 10 years, like it might be a good litmus test for what you allow to affect you emotionally. Because it's weird and it was unexpected for me, and I didn't think I would have any draw to the film at all, and I did. And I think for all the reasons we discussed, I think a lot of the reasons, for instance, not to go over it again, but like some of the things that Shahir, you had an issue with, I think were strengths for me, but that just goes back to how you and I watch films. I do not disagree with a word you've said. It's just we're interpreting it different. And while Speed Racer is not a hill I would consider dying on, I'd put up a decent fight about it, I think, and then wash my hands of it because it's not an incredibly important film in my oeuvre.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. What about? I mean, you got final thing, or you kind of did it?
I've said my final thoughts because I think eventually what I would like to do is connect Inception and Speed Racer.
Oh, we're going to do it
with that notion of imagined realities.
Well, this has been the only podcast about Speed Racer, but what's up, Internet? I bought the airline. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. My name is Shahir Dowd, and welcome back.
And welcome back to Because We Never Left, the only podcast about the film Inception. That's right, you're getting a twofer because this is a review roundup. It's like we're doing the intro again, but you heard it.
I feel like this film almost needs no introduction.
But we just did one.
No. Literally, I don't think... I can't imagine... It's like imagine if we did The Matrix.
Sure.
You know, like it almost needs no introduction.
Look, it's the film that introduced robot farts into trailers.
Oh, I actually know the person who scored that trailer, and I think he would be upset to hear that.
No. Look, it's defined what trailers are.
Right. I would.
What's the tone called? I don't know. I just use robot fart because I don't have a better word. It's just.
I don't know what the technical tone for it is, but the composer is a person I've dealt with professionally. Look, and his work is incredible.
It's incredibly effective. It works amazing. It works so amazing that everyone ripped it off.
Yeah.
And that's why that's why I'm slightly cynical about it. Not because it did something great, because everyone's like, I want to take a shortcut. Like, so
I think there was something incredible to this trailer when it came out. There was something where we've talked we've obviously reviewed Dunkirk on this podcast, and which is odd because that I feel like Christopher Nolan would be at the nexus of a lot of our conversations, being young, well, not necessarily young, but being male,
young at heart,
being male film goers, because his films are very they seem to speak to a male audience fairly directly. But we've only talked about one film, Dunkirk, and I feel like Dunkirk is kind of the exception to the rule of Christopher Nolan in some respect, in that it's not quite like his other films. So I remember when this trailer came out, and obviously, again, go back and listen to that Dunkirk episode. We do kind of a run through of all of Christopher Nolan's films.
Indeed.
And this was in this period where, unlike I think the franchise filmmakers of today who only stick to their franchises, Christopher Nolan seemed to have come into a place where he could do one Batman film, then he would go off and make The Prestige. He would come back and do The Dark Knight, and then he would go off off and make Inception. He would come back and do Dark Knight Rises, then he would go off and Interstellar. He would really do that whole sort of one for you, one for me kind of trick. But his one for me kind of films weren't like personal indies or anything like that. These were big, large-scale blockbusters as well.
Yeah,
they were just they were all original properties. So this is we've become acclimatized to Christopher Nolan at this point. We've seen Memento. I've seen Following, which I absolutely adore. Then Insomnia, and then Batman Begins, which sets Christopher Nolan on the world stage. We get the Prestige after that, which kind of connects to his earlier work.
Sure.
And then we get The Dark Knight right before this, which is the first superhero film to make $1 billion. It's the performance of Heath Ledger.
Yep.
And then in the middle of that, in the middle of the blitz of The Dark Knight, he releases the trailer for Inception, and it's like the director of The Dark Knight, the biggest movie of 2008, possibly one of the biggest movies ever made at that point, is making an original thriller, and nobody knows what it is. That was the beauty of that trailer. Is like you weren't quite sure what was happening in the trailer.
Oh, look, I am a sucker for a good trailer that doesn't tell me shit.
Yeah.
Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The biggest crime that was ever done in trailerdom, I think, was Terminator 2, allowing it to sort of ruin one of the biggest surprises that the film was setting up, is that Arnold's the good guy and the cop T-1000's the bad guy. Like,
right.
And since then, trailers have been fumbling over themselves and blowing their proverbial intellectual loads far too early. And it sucks. You know what actually is a really good trailer that just came out that I'm psyched for now, and it was not on my radar before?
Yeah.
Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Okay. I haven't watched the trailer.
I know you don't, but I was shocked how effective it was. It showed me monsters. It showed me stuff. I don't know what's going on, but I could already tell that there was a story much deeper than the last Godzilla film, even though this one is a direct sequel to it. This one felt like it might know what the hell it's doing as far as human characters, without telling me what's happening.
Okay.
And I was shocked.
Right.
That blew my mind that I was now interested in this film, that I was like, after seeing the last one, I was like, no.
So the trailer sold you on the movie.
It really did, which is its job.
Okay.
And it didn't spoil things. Now, Inception is no exception to that rule, in the sense that it didn't spoil a thing, and it made you wonder, and it made you want to go to the movies and see what the hell this thing was.
I think one of the brilliances of Inception's trailer is it takes the imagery of things that are going to happen in Inception and puts them out of context, so that we don't fully understand, and we want to grasp what they are. So even when they do happen, the issue isn't that it's a spoiler. We suddenly are filled with the context of why it's happening.
Yep.
But let's put ourselves in 2010. So this is 8 years ago now. Where were you when you saw Inception for the first time?
I don't know.
You don't have to tell me. Where were you metaphysically? Where were you kind of in your developmental stage?
Working at MTV. Doing television things, going to see movies, still talking about films. Yeah. Weekly live. I've been doing this a long time. It's very strange. I think 2010. I think I was probably still high off The Dark Knight, to be kind of honest. Inception was great, but I will say I hadn't seen Inception since I saw it in the theaters in 2010.
Okay.
Now that's not a slight to Inception.
Yeah.
That falls into, and I think Inception, to a point, falls into, for me, the category of, once you know the trick, it does lose a little. It loses the wrong word. It shifts the wonder, because I just rewatched it and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
knowing everything about it. I think I often worried that if I watched it again, I wouldn't care, because I knew exactly what it was. And you know me, I'm opinionated. I had thought that I'd figured out what the movie was trying to say anyway, so I didn't need to go see it again to look for clues and blah, blah, blah. But I going back, I found I liked it for the sort of richness as to trying to defend 2010's me's ideas of what the movie was trying to say. And sometimes
You need to unpack that sentence for me a little bit.
Sorry, like I thought I had all the answers for what Inception was trying to say. Is the top still spinning? That sort of thing. And then upon second viewing, I was happy to find that I didn't come to the exact same conclusions that I did, 8 years ago. So I dug the trip. It's a fantastic film. I think that the acting in it is surprisingly worse than I remember, but again, it doesn't matter. I was shocked that outside of Tom Hardy and Ken Watanabe and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's always Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I was not impressed with the acting, especially weirdly of Leo. I'm normally a big Leo fan, and I think I've noticed that Leo can't do fatherhood convincingly. And when the crux of a film is like how he wants to get back to a place with his kids, I never bought. This time, when I first saw it, I was just interested in the visuals, and I was just like, "Whoa, this is a crazy ride." And this one, I was trying to take it down a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. And Mal, who's the actress who plays
Marianne Cotillard?
Thank you so much.
I was like, I could remember her face, and she's fantastic in this movie called Two Nights.
She's fantastic. I want to put her in the camp anyway. I shouldn't say that most of the act. I think Leo threw me. Ellen Page threw me. I don't know. There was just something that almost kind of in a weird way the same thing you felt about Speed.
Yeah.
But in this film, it took away from it more than I thought it would. Again, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the hell out of watching it again. It was super fun. I was just shocked that I was having the issues with it there that I was.
Yeah.
Because I remember it being sort of untouchable.
Right.
But maybe that's just how I've grown as a, it's interesting. Going into Speed Racer, real low expectations. Going into Inception, pretty high expectations. Yeah. And you see how that sort of weighs against itself. Yeah. What about you? You're 2010, Shahir.
2010.
How many Power Rangers were you by this point?
I was at least negative 0.5 Power Rangers at this point. Probably further away than that. Probably -7 Power Rangers.
Fair.
There's 5 Power Rangers, right?
Yep.
So yeah, definitely -7.
I mean, only at one time. There's multiple Power Rangers. We can get into that.
I think I approached it again. I was on. I came to see this because of the Christopher Nolan director trail that kind of led me to this. I had felt that he was a filmmaker that I thought was getting more interesting with the bigger palettes he was getting, but I was somewhat. I really enjoyed Batman Begins, but I found it almost unwatchable a second time. And I every time I watch Batman Begins, I kind of find it very, very difficult to watch because I feel like he around the time of Batman Begins, I think the last sort of film that didn't feel like this was The Prestige. But around the time of Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan's films became kind of labyrinths, and they became giant puzzle boxes. And the puzzle boxes is an interesting analogy, but the problem that I found was that everyone walked around talking about the puzzle box in all of his films.
Yep.
And I found that sort of narrative exposition that every character is doing at every moment of every scene somewhat just difficult to take. And I was always like, I really wish you would just slow down and kind of let us live in a moment here, or let us kind of experience this moment instead of having a character explain what this moment was.
Yeah.
That said, I was very, very impressed by The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight took all of the problems that I had with Batman Begins and made them work. But still maintaining his continual narrative exposition.
Okay.
So I was like, oh wow, he's kind of come around now. I think he's managed to click into place the things that he's doing into sort of a unified thing. And I was really, so when I walked into Inception, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm here for this. And Inception is one of those films that I think is deeply impressive, but also impossibly silly most of the time. So I'm always, this is an ambitious movie.
Yeah.
The construction of dreams within dreams is so complex. The only way to describe it is like Jorge Luis Borges on film. It's the labyrinth, the internal labyrinth that's twisting and moving around, and is somehow still entirely coherent, and it's still kind of, there is a sense that there is an architect behind this that clearly knows what they're doing, even though I find it sort of ridiculously silly most of the time. And most of the time when they're talking about the dreamscapes and how the dreams work, and and how your totem and how to build, and the sort of the mysticism of the dream, and then most importantly Mal's character and Mal's relationship to Cobb, I found kind of interesting but ineffective. It felt like it was the emotional anchor that was meant to be tied to this film to get you to connect to the whole thing, but I never quite sort of connected to it. I always found it sort of difficult to latch onto, in a sense that I always just wondered why they would use Cobb is, this benevolent force of Mal who can, will basically steamroll through any dream that Cobb is in, is like, you go, well, why do you use Cobb then? Like, what is the special skill that Cobb has that causes you to keep using him? So I kind of found that. In repeat viewings, what I've really taken away from it, and this is going to come back to the SpeedRacer discussion, is this notion that the film is about filmmaking in some respect. And the film is about the construction and connection between dreams and cinema. I've always found that the way this film plays with dreams, pretty unsatisfying. Like I feel like these are not the kind of, if this is a film about dreams, these are very clearly the dreams of an action movie junkie. Like these are, gun-toting, action movie kind of scene.
Right.
So I've always found the sort of construction of the usage of dreams in this film to be not problematic, but unsatisfying.
I can see that.
In the conception of where I think dreams are. But the one thing that I think is interesting, well, it's among many things, the notion that this is a deeply connected experience of filmmaking, and rather than dreams, it's actually more of a connection to cinema and our experience of cinema and how movies work for us, which is where, and if you watch it through that lens, the kind of action movie sort of template that it uses for each and every single dream doesn't seem to bother me as much. That's my feeling of it.
Okay. I was always bothered, both the first time I saw it and this time, of how cavalier everyone is about this technology. Like, it's supposed to be a known quantity, like this is something that just happens.
Yeah.
So, but everyone, even Ellen Page, when she's introduced to it,
yeah,
it's just like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I actually don't mind that. I like that they don't dive into how the technology really works.
I don't want to know how it works.
Yeah.
I just want a character who's introduced to it brand new and not in this world of mind espionage to be a little more wowed by it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, cool, must be Tuesday. And another thing, this movie always got me thinking about, because I'm 100% on board with your the dreamscape being a little unsatisfying. In fact, the only thing that ever feels truly dreamy is kind of Limbo, which I have my own problems with.
Yeah.
But could you imagine this tonal type of film, but mixed with the visual style of what the mind looks like, with something like akin to The Cell?
Yeah. So yeah, that Tarsim's film is a much better example of how I would expect dreams to play out on cinema,
exactly.
Or even a David Lynch, which is imagine that.
I mean, that would be insane. It wouldn't be a Christopher Nolan movie anymore, but it would be nuts.
But then there's an interesting thing, which is that this is what I kind of love about the labyrinth of this film.
But David Bowie.
Yeah, it's the David Bowie of this film. Is for every dead end that the viewer walks into like that, there is an explanation within the film.
Oh yeah, they love telling you explanations in this film.
That's that kind of thing, which is I admire the kind of the ambition and the sort of really thorough world building here. I feel like this, the one way you could describe the writing of this film is I feel like this was diagrammed on a wall really clearly. They thought about every roadblock and then worked through it.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
This is more of a nitty-gritty question, and I get a little confused.
Yeah.
So Limbo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it communal?
Yeah, I mean, how is any of this communal?
Well, a lot of it, you can link back to who goes under when and whose dream you're actually in.
Yeah,
and I don't quite. I think in the last bit that we are in Cobb's.
No, I thought we were in Ken Watanabe's.
No, because I think to save Ken Watanabe's life, they have to.
No, there is a weird thing. No, you're absolutely right. There is a weird thing where they jump into Cobb's like limbo, and then they go to like Ken Watanabe's. What's his name? Sato.
Yeah,
they jump into Sato because the film bookends with him in Sato's world.
But he's to save him. I think they jack him into Leo. And they have to rescue him from Leo's subconscious, I think, or limbo is a shared place. Yeah. And also, one thing I have a bit of an issue with is the names of some of the characters in this film. Like, Mal is literally, means bad.
Yeah, malcontent.
Isn't Mal in Spanish bad?
Yeah, in French as well.
Yeah, so, like, that's weird. And then, like, Don Cobb. And, like, I don't know. There's just...
Fun fact, Cobb is the same character name that was in Christopher Nolan's first film, Following.
Okay.
So it's
a lot of the names have, like... really they mean things as opposed to the character. Like, for instance, the Aradne is the designer of the Minotaur's Maze, and there's a lot of like you went to literature, you went to college.
And he did.
Which is great. I love little things like that. You are sort of right. Why is Leo there? Why is Don like the person that can get this done? And there's two.
Also, why don't they just bring his kids to France?
There's two. Sweet child. There's two things. There's two ways it can go. One, because it's cool to have a character with a boogeyman chasing them through a dreamscape.
Yeah.
Or two, he's been dreaming the entire time and everything's about him. They even bring it up. The movie itself brings up the question, like, really? You think a full government agency is going after you?
Yeah.
And that you're special and you can't get extra? Like, there's a whole thing. So, like...
But so the sort of... The sort of critical fallacy that a lot of people have with this film is asking that question of, is this a dream or not? And is that final shot where it cuts to black, is this sort of like, has the whole film been a dream, or is this a dream, or are we in reality now? I never cared for that question. I don't care whether the top topples over. I think the thing that's interesting is that the most important thing to me there is Cobb doesn't care. He doesn't stick around to watch whether it falls over.
Yes.
He's just there with his kid. And I think, to me, that is all I need to know about the ending of the film, is that with real or not, imagined or not, who cares? He is with his child, and that is what he's wanted.
We see their faces.
Yeah. So whether the top spin falls over is irrelevant.
There's an interesting thing about the totems, though, that I didn't quite catch until this time.
Yeah.
So Mal invented the ideas of the totems.
Yeah.
And therefore, they don't work because it didn't work. Well, because Mal went insane.
But it wasn't the thing, though, is that Cobb then suggested with the totem that the world you're in might not necessarily be real. Like, the way he inceptions her is he puts the totem in her dollhouse, and that makes her doubt the reality of the world she's in at that moment. And the one thing I was kind of like, because they have these rules for the totem, which is like, only the weight and
weight
feeling, yada, yada, yada. I was like, wouldn't one of the best things you could do about, like if you want to protect your totem to make sure that it's real and not filled with, from somebody else's subconscious, is never show someone your totem?
Yeah, everyone's like, look at my totem.
Yeah, I was like, well, then doesn't that mean that they can then create a totem in your dream and give it to you, and you could be confused by it?
Yeah, I mean, the more you pick at this film, the less it sort of makes sense. I'm sure there is a definitive, like you said, it was probably designed very specifically on many different walls with lines of yarn connecting things like a serial killer's resume. But I don't think I do like your read of it being that it's not about whether or not he's in the dream, it's where he is left as a character. And that's the way, again, we talk about this a lot, non-endings. I don't think this is a non-ending. I think this is an ending.
Yeah, I think the ending actually fairly not necessarily definitively lands, because it is cut to black kind of thing, but I think I am comfortable where the character is gone.
I understand where Cobb is, and where Cobb is it doesn't matter because he's with his kids.
Yeah.
That's it.
The reason I think this is sort of interesting in this conversation in connection with Speed Racer is this notion of imagined realities.
Sure.
And this notion of realities that are crafted by creators. And you know, in Speed Racer, we've got the sort of intertextual thing with this reality of the race that is pure and is good and that we should all aspire to, that is sort of destroyed by Royalton. And then we've got the sort of metatextual, reality of this world that similarly aspires to that sort of artistic level. In Inception, it's the same thing. It's this sense that the film, to me, if you read it in sort of a certain way, feels like it's a film about construction realities in the same way that people make films. There doesn't seem to be much surprise in the fact that Cobb, in his style and dress, and Leonardo DiCaprio looks a lot like Christopher Nolan. Isn't it amazing if you put the photos together? Sure. They look very, very similar.
So actually, what you're saying right now actually goes back to what Raphael actually wrote about when we asked him more questions about this movie, because he actually originally requested we reviewed this film. He talks about, it's a perfect example that a so-called blockbuster can be pretty damn smart. In my opinion, he says, Nolan is one of the few filmmakers trying something different and original in big-budget movies, not just doing sequels, remakes, and otherwise repeating the same formula over and over again. I agree with that statement, even though he does use his favorite little buddy in the entire things he always does, which is time. He plays with time in a weird, fun way. But the active sort of thing that I really like about this film and what goes into the sort of filmmaking as this film as a metaphor for filmmaking is Christopher Nolan's gonna make a blockbuster. Christopher Nolan's gonna make a blockbuster about going in dreams.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan's gonna make a blockbuster about going in dreams that actually is very akin to making a film, because that's what the architect is actually doing in all of these things. Yeah. Like, you can go down the levels.
For example, the snow chase is very much like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the James Bond film, you know?
And then there's Limbo, and then after that, I think, Shahir, after you get to Limbo, if you can get to a fifth level, that's Speed Racer.
Yeah, Speed Racer is the absolute final level of Dreamscape, or maybe it's a nightmare. I don't know, depending on how you look at it.
I think it's just for me,
it might be a nightmare.
It's what I hope my subconscious looks like.
Yeah, I think there. Again, this notion of imagined reality. So both films are and both characters in both films, or characters in all films, are kind of striving to some reality. And they both come to this conclusion as well. Again, not necessarily intentionally, saying that both these films are kind of connected in this way, but the way I connect these two films,
sure,
is this idea that the truth that they aspire to is not actually a truth that they originally believed it was. And in Inception, you have Cobb kind of finally confront Mal at the end of the film and say, I did the best I could, but you are a mere shadow of who Mal actually was and the complexities of her. Mm-hmm. You are just a facsimile of what I think Mal was. And in Speed Racer, I think it's that same sort of aspirational question around the purity of the race. That gets deconstructed, and then he kind of is able to move on from it. And it, like from an academic point of view, then this is film 101 kind of stuff, but there's a famous article by Jean Baudrillard called Simulacra and Simulation, which I think speaks to the sense of imagined realities that this film kind of that both these films kind of speak to. Have you ever read that essay? Or?
So long ago.
Yeah. So simulation is this idea that there is a connection to the real. So objects. If you create something, there is a connection to the real. There's a simulation of. But then there's this alternate thing, and he calls it a higher order of simulation called simulacra. And the suggestion there is simulacra almost has no connection to the real anymore, and it's its own entity unto itself. So an example of simulacra would be Disneyland. Disneyland is supposedly sort of a simulation of Americana as we know it, but in fact it has no representative quality of America as we know it.
Right. It only is what it is because it says it is what it is.
And it has become its own entity. So Simulacra is...
it's chaos magic.
The quote I would use from him from Baudrillard is the simulacrum is never that which conceals the truth. It is the truth which conceals that there is none. The simulacrum is true unto itself.
Right.
And I think the point there that Inception kind of plays at is the only truth of Mal as she exists now is the one that exists in his head. The real Mal does not exist anymore.
Right.
She is no longer a thing. It is just a manifestation of what is hid. And it's not the true Mal. And that is the reason why I don't care when the thing topples over is that the totem means nothing.
Well, because it's all perception. Yeah. I mean, look, it's also... God, it's weird we're talking about sort of the reality of things because we live now currently in a world where reality could literally be put into question depending on who you actually speak to.
I have a good quote for that.
But the fact of the matter is, yeah, Leo invents a monster in a reality, and then he beats the monster that he invents in his own reality, and maybe he's in real world and maybe he's in fake real world, but it feels real enough to him to continue on. The other thing about SpeedRacer is Speed is in, and I'm talking about sort of the mindset of racing as his reality. First, it's pure. It's something he enjoyed with his brothers and his father, and it's something that he thinks can't be tainted. And then someone rips the curtain away and says, no, fuck you. It's not that. This is what it is. This is what you like. Your sentiment is bullshit. This is how the real world works.
Yeah.
And then the entire rest of the film is him fighting to prove that, like, to rip a third layer away and be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a.
I think both characters are kind of fighting to regain their sense of reality.
But the sense of reality, honestly, whether or not that sense of reality is real doesn't matter as long as you feel like the reality is real. I'm saying you as in the characters. Yeah. So Cobb feels like his reality at the end is real. Speed feels like his reality at the end is real, even though if you watched another racing season, it's probably going to go straight back to...
There's no sense that the world is actually restored order in any way.
No.
And I think that's the sort of not the quandary, but the framing that Raphael's question kind of posits as well, which I think is great, isn't it amazing that a large scale blockbuster can play in that continuum where ideas are more important than the actual sort of spectacle of it.
Here's the interesting thing, though. I think the ideas are what keep it. The ideas are what keep it a classic. Yeah. But the ideas aren't the thing that got us into the seats. We had a pedigree of a director we really liked and a storyteller we really enjoyed. So we have that. Plus, we had this trailer that showed us mind-bending visual. The hallway, rotating hallway scene. Dear God,
yeah,
it's amazing.
I would venture to say that's the best visual spectacle that Nolan has ever made.
It's so good.
Yeah,
and so I think we come for the flashiness.
Yeah.
But we stay for the emotion, not the emotional, for the intellectual.
I think for the repeat viewing as well. Like I think the film stands up to repeat viewings, even though I find, like I said right at the front, I find it a deeply impressive but also ridiculously silly film.
Yeah.
But no matter how silly I find it, I still enjoy the experience of watching it because I feel like it's like going down a labyrinth that always has interesting corners that I kind of want to explore a little further every single time.
Yeah.
So it does actually function. And if you think about, I think one of the primary complaints I've had about blockbusters on this podcast is how throwaway so many of them feel. This does not feel throwaway.
No.
Because there is a lot at the heart of this that is trying to expand the medium in any way. I had an interesting conversation with Will where we talked about this was a phrase of my own invention, but the morality clause that filmmakers make with their audiences. And the morality and ethical clause kind of suggests that we will not, in large scale films, is that we will not go too far out of the mainstream. We will not venture too far beyond, like you're not going to get a Alejandro Jodorowsky film if you're coming to watch Transformers, like things aren't going to get super, super weird. Not like Boots Riley, for example, doesn't have to make that morality clause because he's not speaking to a large scale audience. And I think Speed Racer and Inception are two really good examples of, I think ethical clause is probably a better phrasing because morality clause, we were talking about something else. But Inception and Speed Racer are two good examples of the ethical contract that you make with an audience being broken and not broken. I think in the case of Inception, there's a sense of leading you into a film that has got all the spectacle that you would normally expect. It has got all the visual thrills that you would normally expect. And this is surprising given that it's a film about dreams, and you and I both agreed that our dreams don't look and feel like this. This feels like a movie. But does expand the boundaries of what you can get. Not too far, but just enough to make it interesting. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like the reason why Speed Racer wasn't necessarily as well accepted and is only kind of regaining some fervor now because of time passing is that I think it broke that contract with the audience. I think it was a step too far for most audience members in terms of the visual language was just too far beyond. But that doesn't mean it's not.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Not fully cohesive.
The last thing I think I'll say, and this is again, I like picking apart the story of Inception because we all know it's a good film. Limbo. Again, I go back. Yeah. How is it so dangerous if all you have to do to escape it is kill yourself?
So I think the first thing I want to point out as well is we very rarely see them old in Limbo. And the suggestion is they were there for 50 years.
Yeah.
But whenever we see them, they're 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
There's one shot where you see them kind of old.
Walking, holding hands.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, wait, what?
But then they're young when they go to the train tracks.
Yeah, and whenever we see them kind of building Limbo, it's like they're young. Anyway,
yeah.
I think the issue with Limbo is that if you stay in there for too long, you become convinced that this is the reality that you can exist in.
Okay.
And the issue that Cobb had was that he in order to get Mal out of Limbo, he made the suggestion did inceptioned her with this idea that the reality you live in might not be the real reality.
Sure.
But unfortunately, that idea, like he says,
took root.
And so when they went back up into the real world, where they may have only been asleep for 20 minutes or an hour or a day or whatever, that idea continued and it grew and it bred and it festered to the point where she took her life in that world.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is that the pleasures of Limbo are such that they can overpower your sense of reality.
Okay.
I think.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I think I think that would probably hold up under a closer. That feels correct.
Yeah.
I was just wondering that because I was watching it and I was like, this seems like here's the thing. It feels like it would be such a gradual thing that you'd catch yourself before that happened, but but
you don't know you're in a dream until you wake up.
But everyone who was in Limbo at the end knew they were in Limbo. That's the weird. So it's only a matter of time until you know that until you don't know that.
It would have been interesting if Aradnia had went into Limbo and became seduced by it.
Yeah.
And was like, no,
because she's supposed to be this dream architect, and now you can literally do whatever you want whenever you want. You're telling me that's not sexy? You're telling me that's not what you want to do?
See, this is also the sort of wonderful sort of, I guess, finger trap of this film, which is that you can always get locked into certain ideas here. And one of the things I would say is that none of the characters feel like individual characters. They feel like very pure archetypes that don't seem to have a lot of personality. I would love it if when we went into Tom Hardy's dream that it had this entirely different visual language to every other dream. And when we went into Limbo, I mean, Limbo kind of does have its own visual language, but everyone had their own visual language. And they sort of do. But the interesting thing is one of the things Cobb says is everyone in my dream is actually just a manifestation of my own psychology. And then if you watch this as like a manifestation of Christopher Nolan discussing the process of making a film, every character is just like him.
Here's the last nit I will pick about this film. So Saito, he wants to get this guy to dissolve his company, so he can be the leader of all big money people who are leaders.
Well, he also has an altruistic way. He says that the future of energy depends upon. Yeah, I don't believe it.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Sure. Let's say he's the most altruistic man ever to live.
Who also buys an airline.
Well, that one line, the line that I actually said when we started this midpoint conversation, is actually the line that if I wanted to could break the movie for me, because I find it hard to believe that a man who could just do that on a whim and who is the second most rich whatever the heck person on the mountain couldn't have a million other options other than doing this elaborate kidnapping scheme. It's
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And it's so funny because like, I get it. Like his superpower is that he's rich. Like I understand.
He also happens to be in places at the exact, if he turns up in Mombasa.
Deus Ex all day long. So look, I'm not trying to, I don't want to pee on anyone's candle to make mine burn brighter. I just want it's moments like that.
Phrase
you
before.
haven't?
I've never heard that phrase.
Oh
before.
wow, no, that's
how does peeing on someone else's candle?
It doesn't. Okay. That's the thing. You do it whenever you shit on somebody or you talk down to them. It's like you're trying to do it to make yourself feel better, but that never makes your particular candle. If I put out a candle, it doesn't make mine brighter.
In New Zealand, we call it tall poppy syndrome.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's basically where if there's a tall poppy, you cut it down so everyone's on the same level.
See, that's nice. Yours is like life and plants, and ours is just burn, shit, and piss.
Well, we don't pee on things.
Well, sure. Sure you don't. Anyway, Inception's great. I like that you found a way, Shahir, to connect these two films, and that's not an easy feat, and I agree with how you've chosen to connect them. And at first, I got to be honest, when you texted me about how we're going to do this, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a stretch. I don't think it's a stretch at all.
Yeah.
I think what's the word I'm looking for? I discounted this idea before the conversation, and I have been turned around by the evidence and the discussion that we've had, because it makes 100% sense.
Well, I'm glad. I think I appreciate that both Will and Raphael asked us these questions, and I think Will's question in particular, can style be substance, is the framework for how you could watch a lot of movies and think about a lot of movies and how they're put together.
Yeah.
And I think Inception just has a. I will here's a suggestion though to like really break the world.
An Inception.
There's an interesting thing, which is that Christopher Nolan was offered the keys to the DC cinematic universe after the success of the Batman franchise. He was basically said, you can direct Superman if you want to, or you can choose your successor. And he did choose a successor, and the person he chose was Zack Snyder.
Yep.
And he chose Zack Snyder on the basis of the film Sucker Punch. And the reason I have always been like, that's a strange choice, because Inception, in every way that Inception manages to work, Sucker Punch completely falls flat on its face.
Yeah.
But it is working in the same kind of layered reality that I think Christopher Nolan is very interested in. And it doesn't quite, it obviously doesn't function very well, but this is how we were sort of fortunate to get two interesting films by two three very commanding filmmakers. The connections don't necessarily work as well if you get confronted by a film like Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch, it's so funny because here's what I think. I think if you got Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder talking about like realities within realities and like in a room talking about that stuff, I think that they would love that conversation more than anything. And I think that is probably what sold him more than even... I think the idea of Sucker Punch sold him more than Sucker Punch did.
Well, have you seen Sucker Punch?
I did.
I actually do have a lot of respect for Zack Snyder. I really, really like Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. I don't think he's made very good films, but I think he's got an interesting thing. And I
want it to evolve.
Yeah, I'm curious as to like... if he could, because I think he's actually almost, in a weird way, not far off from Christopher Nolan, but Christopher Nolan is a much more coherent filmmaker. And there's this thing that I think about, which is the mirror box of filmmaking. Like, ultimately, once you've made a film, it is a manifestation of who you are as a person.
At that moment, yeah.
Yeah, at any moment. Like, it is what you... every failure of a film is a reflection of you, the failures of your thinking process.
Yeah.
And every success is a reflection of your successes. And I think Zack Snyder has the ability to succeed because he's not that far off from what Christopher Nolan does, but Christopher Nolan managed to succeed, whereas Zack Snyder doesn't.
Well, I mean, it also depends on what your definition of success is. I mean, they're both incredibly...
Not monetarily.
Okay.
I'm gonna borrow the Wachowskis, purity of the race kind of theory,
Sure.
and I would say that Christopher Nolan has had far more success as a filmmaker.
Well, especially these days. And I said I want Zack Snyder to evolve. But to that point, I almost kind of want him to devolve. I want to see more of the style of stuff he did back when he did the remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I still think Watchmen is a phenomenal film. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again until my dying day.
Yeah.
The reason why Watchmen works with Zack Snyder and Man of Steel and the DC cinematic universe does not is because I do believe that deep down, Zack Snyder doesn't like the concept of superheroes. He wants to deconstruct them and do different things with them. The reason why Watchmen works, and I've said this before, is because the entire thing is dealing with the ridiculousn's and sort of the deconstruction of superheroes and how superheroes wouldn't really work in a long-term thing. So like there's it's the flavors that match really well together. I want Zack Snyder to find, preferably out of superhero-dom, I want him to do a film that matches his flavor and his interests in a better way, and I hope that wasn't Sucker Punch.
Well, perhaps Atlas Shrugged will be it, or is it? No, it's the Fountainhead he's doing next. The Ayn Rand film.
Yep. So we'll see.
Who knows?
Anyway, wow, we've been going for a bit here. Anything else in Inception before we close out this wonderful request roundup number 2?
Nothing other than thank you to both Will and Raphael for suggesting them. I've enjoyed revisiting them.
And this has been the only podcast about Inception and Speed Racer,
the strangest double feature you will ever watch.
It's good. It was an enjoyable double take for me. Shahir, when you are not racing down the track of your own dreams, where can folks find you?
Probably asleep most of the time at www.shahirdowd.com. Matt, when you are not purchasing airlines for which you can sleep in first class, where could people find you?
You can find me nuzzling up with one of those giant-ass neck pillows and a giant bottle of scotch at matthewkerol.com for my life and works. Also Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, please check out all of my work and everyone's hard work over at Extra Credits. We're doing some super fun stuff these days. Flu pandemic still trucking. The flu's still going, Shahir. Yeah. And we're doing a couple. I can't talk about that. Damn it. Never mind. Anyway, yeah, this has been super fun. Thank you, everyone who has not only requested things that we are catching up on, but that continues to want to request things and listens and everything. Please email us with your thoughts about Inception or Speed Racer at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, or you could find us at onlymoviepod on Twitter. And Facebook. Still message on Facebook. Hell, message on Instagram. Message us anywhere.
But just don't request movies.
But just don't request movies. I mean, you can. It just we won't do them.
Yeah.
But we'd love to talk about. We love talking about any of this stuff. We get into a lot of fun conversations on Twitter. Shahir is very active on there, and I pop in for annoying color commentary. Yeah, that's it. We'll see you next time, or you'll hear us next time
in your dreams.
In your dreams, dream a little dream
of me.
Oh.
You took it too far. I liked it where it was before. You ruined it. You made it like you took what was a good idea and you layered it down bad. I didn't enjoy what you did. The tone was wrong.